Okay, we're continuing our series, Gems of Truth, Spiritual Wisdom from the Words of Jesus. And today we're looking at the value of letting go. And so Jesus said, "No one puts a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch tears away from the garment, and a worse tear is made. Neither is new wine put into old wineskins. If it is, the skins burst, and the wine is spilled, and the skins are destroyed. But new wine is put into fresh wineskins, and so both are preserved." Probably not too many of us have dealt with wineskins and seen what Jesus is talking about here, but I'm sure we have read about it and know the process that he's talking about. That it's fermentation would expand, a flexible container such as a wine skin, an animal skin that you used to use to store wine. And if that vessel is emptied and new wine is put into it, obviously it would go through the expansion process again, and the skins are already expanded as far as they'll go, so they won't hold the wine. They'll burst and lose everything. It's the same with the unshrunk cloth. You get the idea that you can't put something new on something old because it just doesn't work. And of course, he's not talking about cloth and wineskins as usual. He's talking about consciousness. He's talking about what's going on inside of us. And he probably was talking in the context of his own religion, Judaism, and how what he was saying about it, what he was saying about actually the mystical side of Judaism, that was not necessarily anything new, but the way it's presented and the way that it's interpreted was new. And that most people of his day probably, I'm assuming, just like many people of today, when they declare they have a religion, that means they go to church, they adopt or memorize certain dogmas, creeds, probably profess certain beliefs, but then go about the rest of their day, or rest of their week, without bringing any of these principles into play. Maybe keeping them as running in the back of their minds or something. And I don't know what goes on in everybody's mind, of course, but I know that mainstream religion can become such a rote experience that we don't really get down beneath the surface of it. And Jesus saw that of the Judaism of his day. As I have said before, there were something like 600 practices that if you were a good Jew, you would do those every day. People would make sure they did those things, but did they have a consciousness of the principles behind those things? It's like, say, the ritual of baptism. I can say that I was baptized. I went through the ritual of being immersed in a pool of water in front of an audience, which was kind of embarrassing, actually. But that is supposed to be the moment where I was saved. Well, there's something behind that. There's a principle behind that. And because I went through the ritual, and I've told you this story, that I would ask my minister later on, "I don't feel so saved. Should I do it again?" And he said, "No, you're saved." So it's like going through the ritual, that's the thing. Well, what baptism is a symbol of, and it is a symbol. It doesn't matter if you sprinkle oil, sprinkle water, dunk. Doesn't matter how you do it. What it represents is an immersion, is starting out as one thing, experiencing an immersion and coming out something different. So when you are in your quiet time at home, you're experiencing baptism if you're plugging in. You sit down to be still, maybe you're a little frantic about something, and you relax and you begin to let go. And you begin to feel peace, your body releases all the stress and so on, and you then open yourself to a wonderful feeling that my life really is okay, that this will work out. I let go. I trust. There's a divine wisdom working through me now. God is guiding me. And there's a change of consciousness that occurs, and that's what baptism is. But it is in the most extreme understanding when an individual believes they're simply a human being and they have this spiritual awakening. They realize they are a spiritual being. They're an expression of God. And it's a profound revelation. The near-death experience is the same kind of thing. Driving down the road, hit a garbage truck, suddenly you're floating through a tunnel and see a light and beings of light, and you're told it's not your time, you got to go back, but it's an incredible experience. You don't want to go back. But you've been immersed in something. You've had an experience that has changed your whole way of thinking. And maybe you don't think differently from that point on, but you never lose that baptism, that moment, that realization that there is indeed a deeper level of reality than I am generally conscious of. So you don't get that just by being dunked in water. There's kind of a build-up to the whole thing, when you're going through the actual ritual, and many of you have done this. There's a build-up to it, and it's a ritual, a rite that you pass through. And so you say, okay, I've done that, and I'm something else now. But it's more in thought than it is in experience. And that's not true with everybody, I realize that. But I didn't get the same kind of experience I have had with God in my baptism that I had in a moment of extreme frustration where I was at the end of my rope and just something opened up in me that was incredible. Completely different from anything I had thought before. And how I define God, I would say the way we define God is a head thing. It's not. We're trying to define something that's indefinable. It's an experience. So we always want to look beyond the ritual, want to look beyond, and that's, I think, what Jesus was doing. He was telling the people around him, your minds are closed. Yes, you're religious, you're professing religious, you believe in God, but are you experiencing this deeper level? Are you experiencing this deeper reality out of which you are at this moment flowing? So you can't keep the old wineskins in place, that is, the old belief system. It's not enough to just believe. It's like the man that was asking Jesus for help. I believe, but help thou my unbelief. It's like, yes, I have all the principles in my head. I've read all the books. But there's an experience, there's a level of experience that takes us to a very much deeper reality. A very deeper reality. That's not a very good sentence, I know, but a deeper reality, let's say that. That God is present, and we live and move and have our being in God, but we walk through God all the time without being conscious of it. And that's what he's saying. What are we conscious of? We're conscious of the old wineskins or the old cloth. We're trying to put new ideas into that, but we're not letting go. We're not changing. We're not replacing the wineskins. And that's the experience of being born again. And Nicodemus had a hard time with that one, when Jesus talked about being born again. How can a man leave the womb and go back in to be reborn? And Jesus kind of criticized him for being a spiritual teacher that didn't know what in the heck he was talking about. And that's very common. There are a lot of PhDs out there talking about spiritual things that don't have a clue as to what they're talking about. You can tell by listening to them they've never had a spiritual experience. When you have one, when you have a real awakening, you know when someone else is describing it. I think that's the near-death thing too. What happens with people that go through a near-death experience is they can't relate so well to the rest of the world because they don't know what that's like. They try to explain it, and everybody shakes their head and thinks they were hallucinating or had their oxygen cut off or something, or run on drugs. And they say it's not anything like that. But they understand each other. When they hear someone else that's gone through it, they understand. So that other person that's gone through it, and they themselves have discarded the old wineskins. They've said, I don't know even who I am or what I am. I just know I'm incredible. I know that this whole experience is incredible, but it's nothing like I thought. One man said he looked back on his life and he said it looked like just so much paper mache. Carl Jung had a near-death experience. He said it was like when he re-entered his body, it was like being hung back on a branch in a little box. Now I've got to act as if this is all good, this is all okay again. These people have had experiences that are transcendent. They transcend the current consciousness. And it's not that we want to run away from where we are. But if we have not had the experience that has moved us to the core, where we know without a doubt, we know without any question whatsoever that we have experienced a deeper reality, then we give up our beliefs in favor of a knowing. And what's interesting is if you have a spiritual experience, or just say you find something like unity and you're all excited about it because it's moving something deep in you, and you're on an elevator and somebody says, well, what's this unity thing? Can you explain your experience by the time you get to the third floor? Probably not. It takes about 10 floors or 20 floors to just get warmed up. This was a very frustrating thing for me in the beginning. I know it was for many of you too. You discover something that just knocks you over. You just know it's real, but you can't really explain it to anybody. You're talking to old wineskins. And that's not a criticism to people, because we were all there. We've all hung on to these things, and we're doing it still. We're doing it now. It's the thing that prevents us from experiencing the deeper level that's here now. People talk about the world is going to change, that people are all going to come together and all. I've mentioned this many times. I've given this up because, as the Gospel of Thomas says, when the disciples asked Jesus, when will the kingdom come? He says the kingdom is spread out upon the earth, and men do not see it. So when will everything change? The answer is that it's all spread out upon the earth and we don't see it. So what has to change? Jesus is addressing this consciousness that doesn't see what's spread out upon the earth. It doesn't see this experience that we're having as divine. Is God ever going to intervene? That's another question that comes up often. We see all the horrible things going on and wonder when that's going to happen. Well, God cannot intervene because God has never stopped being God. God has never stopped being. Intervention is not an option because it's never quit. But the wineskin mentality, the old wineskin mentality, does not allow us to see this. We have this perception that the world is a mess and someday God up from the sky is going to come down and solve everything. I was talking to somebody about, and I wrote an article about this on my blog this week, about do we choose our parents? There's the belief that we make the choice for the parents that we use to enter this plane, and I think it's a good possibility. But the way that it was brought up to me recently was that my parents messed up my life, but I chose them, so it's my problem. Why would I do that? And what I suggested in the article and to the person was, You know, if your parents both were dead, if they could appear to you right now, knowing what they know, having stepped out of their body, having stepped out of the wineskin mentality that they probably were living from, and maybe they weren't the greatest parents in the world, if they could step out of that as they have, and they could appear before you, what I'm sure they would tell you is, I am absolutely sorry that I didn't have the insight I have now. I wish I had, but I didn't. I was coming from a limited perspective. And so I concluded the article by saying, if you want to choose your parents, choose those. Choose those. Let go of the bad ones. Let go of the ones that were struggling to raise you. Let go of the ones that didn't have all the foresight that they have now. And choose the ones that are standing before you in your mind, apologizing. Not because they made mistakes, but because in the body, our vision shuts down. We lose a lot of who we are. Science just says that we use 10% of our brain, but that's another way of saying, that when the soul, which is infinite, steps into a finite body, its faculties are shut down. Probably more than 90%. But when you're free of that, you don't see anything from the same perspective. And I'm not talking about that we have to die, that we have to lose this body, and neither was Jesus. He was saying there's a way to tap into this larger picture, this larger experience. This wineskin that is inflated just as far as it can go. And yes, you can read new books and all, but you're not really changing that wineskin by doing that. You've got to let go of the wineskin. Totally let go of it. So you could look at anyone on this planet now that you're dealing with in the same way, that if they're treating you wrong, if they're treating you badly, the time will come when they will find a level of themselves where they wouldn't even imagine doing that to you. And you the same. That person already exists. If they're treating you bad now, and just instantly they could step out of their body and see who they really are, see their wholeness, see that they have nothing to protect, nothing to defend, they would instantly stop the argument. Catherine Ponder talks about writing a letter to a person that you're having trouble with, writing a letter to their angel. Same thing. Writing a letter to that level of the person that is free of the thing they're fighting for, free of the thing they're protecting, because there's so much more. And they're so happy that there's so much more. We get into these skirmishes because we're protecting our wineskins. So Jesus is saying there's a whole different way to experience life. And that we experience it as we do is because of what we're hanging on to, what we're unwilling to let go. And that's why the Jews were so critical of him, because he looked like he was challenging their belief system, but he really wasn't. He said he didn't come to break the law, but to fulfill it. That is, I didn't come to destroy religion. I came as an expression of what religion is all about. It's an awakening to the presence of God as our source. And he had that consciousness so strongly that he called himself Son. And he spoke of God as Father. But he didn't just say my Father, although he did. He said our Father. He saw all people from that same perspective. He was experiencing freedom right in the face of an incarnation, and one that was often under attack. He was just talking about his shift in consciousness. So the value of letting go. It's false perceptions that hinder our ability to enjoy freedom of the moment. So let's bring this into our current experience, our daily experience, our moment by moment experience. How do you see yourself? How are you seeing your life right now? You would like to experience more freedom. What exactly would be stopping you from doing that? You ask yourself that question. Why am I not more free? Why am I not feeling more free? Maybe you'll make a list of things, reasons why that's not true. I need to resolve this issue and that issue, and when I get them all resolved, I'll be free. And then you got to get really honest with yourself and say, have you ever resolved all your issues? Have you ever checked off every item on that list? It's a moving thing, if you notice. You get them all checked off and a new one shows up. There's always a reason not to be free. And so we wait and we wait. We wait for a Messiah of some kind to come. So that's happening now. Our waiting is a wineskin. It's a consciousness that's frozen in a certain perspective of who we are and what our life is. And we can't experience any freedom or joy beyond that. So it's an internal dialogue that we start with ourselves. False preconceptions that hinder our ability to enjoy freedom of the moment. What false perceptions? What false preconceptions? And preconception is an old wineskin. It was there prior to this moment. Done all the stretching it's going to do. I'm in this situation, I can't get out of it. That's the wineskin. Because God says, I'm already out of it. The resolution has already occurred. But for some reason, we're clinging to this thing, this particular perception. We're not required to do that. How much of our creative energy is drained away replaying old hurts and dredging up old things we should or should not have done? And again, that's the whole parental issue. As I point out in my article, one of the things that is that helps, I think, saying that yes, I chose my parents, it makes me proactive. They didn't do it to me. I'm not a victim anymore. I chose this. Okay, maybe it's all screwed up, but I chose it. And if I chose it, I can unchoose it. I can choose to experience it differently. I think that's the thing probably most of us get. Those that embrace that. And I'm not so sure it's true, because as I also raised in the article, when you fertilize an egg outside of the womb with a donated sperm and egg in a glass container in a laboratory someplace, and you raise the question to the offspring of that process and say, did you choose your parents? Well, would they say one of the donors, both the donors, the glass jar, the laboratory? Do your parents give birth to your soul? That's where we are. That's what we have to come to make any sense out of this. And I think our parents were a door that we chose to walk through. And it doesn't necessarily mean we were in sync with them. Maybe we were, maybe we weren't. Ian Stevenson talks about cases of little children remembering their past lives. And some claim that the current life that they're in, their parents are not theirs. Their parents live in another town, and they're adamant about it. But the child used these parents to step through that door. The parents were the door. There's just a lot of interesting questions that are raised if you open your mind to this type of thing. Ian Stevenson was one of the best researchers in that field, and Jim Tucker has taken up his work at the University of Virginia. They've given us a profound body of research on this question. And it's, I don't know how anyone can read it and go away unconvinced that we've all been here before. And we do make these choices. And there are stories that Ian Stevenson talks about a little girl in Spain that was in a family, and she fell in love with a boy, and her father just totally was against it, ran the boy off. The little girl was so distraught that she sat out in the weather and intentionally got pneumonia and died. She wanted to come back as the child of her aunt, I think it was. And she did. And she came back in that capacity. She made that choice, according to the story. And she identified many of the things in her previous experience. There was just very little doubt that she was lying. So I think it works in all kinds of ways. There's not just one way. It might be better to say, instead of did I choose my parents, say did I choose the door I came through? Because that's really the important question. Why did I do it? Why did I make that choice? Regardless of what door I came through, why did I come through it? Did I come here to suffer? Did I come here to experience the pain that I'm having now? Did my soul come here to learn something? I don't believe that. Because I believe that when we make that choice, our soul is free. So why would a free soul choose an experience that is anything but free, go through that for 70, 80, 90 years, and come out saying, that was nice? It doesn't seem like we do that. But the whole mechanism that we are missing is the spiritual dimension. We're in it even in a body, even when we can't see, even when we don't see. Paul said we see through a glass darkly. We now see through a glass darkly. The time will come when we'll see face to face. But where is that time? That time is not somewhere in the future necessarily. It is in a moment of releasing the wineskin, the preconception of who I am and what I'm doing here, and who and what God is. I open myself to this presence. It's here fully. It's not developing. It's not emerging. It's not evolving. It's here fully. What barriers are there between myself, my awareness, my consciousness, and this presence? And in truth, there are no barriers. The only barrier is this wineskin and this this old cloth Jesus is talking about. Consciousness, perceptions, preconceptions. The full action of God is present in each new moment. We say we don't have the time or energy to do what we would really like to do. How does God attend the minutest detail of this vast universe? By being fully present in each new moment. It's like God is not waiting for something to happen to make the universe better. The universe is perfect as it is, and we live in the universe. We're products of the universe. But where we really live is in our own minds, our own heads, our own preconceptions, this collection of ideas we call consciousness. That's the wineskin. Is it true? Is it done? Are we satisfied with it? We live in this bondage of our own thought, thinking someday something's going to come out and change. But nothing needs to. It's all finished. The universe is complete now. Yes, it's always moving, it's always expanding. We think it is. That's what we think today. As I said, this cosmic background that they hear, I think it's the sound of God laughing. I don't really think we know what we're listening to on this kind of stuff. So give your attention to the task at hand. Let go of the problems of the past that you can do nothing about. New wine, new wineskins. is a thought worth holding each time you're tempted to pick up the old. When do you know you're picking up the old? Every time you have a negative reaction. You're picking up something old. And that's the signal. Because what you're saying with that negative reaction is I'm going into bondage because something's upsetting my world. But what if you hold this idea that my world can't be upset, the true world that I live in, that I am a citizen of, can be harmed in no way whatsoever. Okay, so that's the value of letting go. All right, thanks for coming out, and see you next week, and have a very meaningful Memorial Weekend.